I stepped into the bedroom and immediately knocked out the man who'd been sleeping with my cheating wife. I bound them both, pulled a syringe from my bag and said, "I'm going to inject you with a powerful poison. You'll have 30 minutes to tell me your story in detail. If you do, maybe I'll give you the antidote." Their faces drained of color as I flipped on the camera. People say you never forget the moment your world collapses. The memory carves itself into you. The sounds, the smells, the way the air sits on your skin. For me it was the scent of lavender candles and a faint jazz tune floating down the hall. Everything looked normal on the surface, but deep inside I already felt the wrongness. I'd just come off an 18-hour shift at the hospital. As an ER doctor, my life revolved around blood, adrenaline, and fatigue. Saving people, fixing the shattered, then coming home late to a wife who always said she understood. We'd been married for 7 years. And until recently I believed we were happy. Sure, things had been tense lately. Less talking, more excuses, her phone face down on the counter. I blamed my schedule, the job, the tiredness. I thought we were weathering a rough patch. Turns out I was the only one fighting for it. I climbed the stairs, each step heavy, my body sore from the shift, and then I heard it. A breath, a soft laugh. Her laugh, but not the version for me. Playful, different. Then a man's low murmur. I froze. My mind refused the truth. It had to be the TV, a call with a friend. Anything but what I suspected. Still, something in me already knew. I inhaled slowly, pulse thudding, and pushed the door open. Bare skin, twisted sheets, tangled limbs. Her eyes were the second thing I saw, wide, frozen in panic. She gasped and scrambled to cover herself. The man beside her, a stranger in my bed, flinched with his face half buried in the pillows. I just stood there, numb. Time stretched and every detail burned in. The candle she'd lit, wine glasses on my nightstand. The sheets I'd bought wrapped around another man. I should have shouted. I should have raged. Instead, I stared as my life rearranged into something I barely recognized. Then the stranger made a mistake. He moved, sat up, blinked in confusion. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I lunged before thinking. My fist found his jaw with a sickening crack, bone on bone. He had no time to reply before I grabbed his throat and slammed him into the headboard. His head snapped back and the bed heaved. My wife screamed, "John, stop." I didn't. The man in front of me wasn't an accident. He was her choice. Both of them would face the consequences. My thoughts weren't clear, or maybe they were the clearest they'd ever been. My eyes flicked to my work bag by the door. Inside I had everything I needed, not to save lives this time. I let the man slump back, groaning, and walked slowly to the bag. I unzipped it and produced a syringe. The moment she saw it, her face drained. "John, what are you doing?" she whispered. I held up the needle, voice steady. "This," I said, rolling it between my fingers, "is a powerful neurotoxin." Her lover's eyes widened with pure terror. I sat on the bed's edge and watched them writhe. "Here's how it works," I said, deliberate. "Once injected, you have about 30 minutes before full paralysis sets in. Then your organs shut down, one after another." She began to shake. The man let out a strangled sound. I smiled, reached back into my bag, and brought out a small vial of clear liquid. "There's an antidote," I told them, placing it on the nightstand between the wine glasses. Their eyes locked onto it. "Now," I said, turning my phone on and hitting record. "You're going to tell me the truth. Everything." The room tightened, heat prickling the air. Lisa sat frozen, clutching the sheets like they might save her. Matt leaned against the headboard, hand over his bleeding nose, pain contorting his face. I perched on the bed's edge, syringe in hand, my pulse loud in my ears. The rage was still there, a burning, consuming thing, but alongside it a new realization. How far would I go? Years of saving lives had given me knowledge and tools. For the first time I had absolute control over life and death, and the thought terrified me. It also stirred something darker. I didn't hate that control. "Start talking," I said. Silence. Lisa's lip trembled, but she wouldn't speak. Matt's eyes pinged between me and the syringe, panic making his breath shallow. I sighed and tilted the needle so a tiny drop fell onto the sheets, which made him choke out a noise. Okay, please just let me explain," he begged. I turned to Lisa. She was still mute, pale, knuckles white from gripping fabric. "Lisa," I said, calm, "do you want your boyfriend to take all the blame? Or are you going to tell me the truth?" She swallowed hard. "John, Her breath hitched. "I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Really? Because you sure as hell didn't look worried about that a few minutes ago." Tears welled, but I felt nothing. "How long?" I asked. She closed her eyes, throat bobbing as she found the word she'd been hiding. 6 months, she whispered. My jaw tightened. I'd suspected something was wrong, but hearing it aloud opened a new kind of pain. I turned to Matt. And you? I demanded. He hesitated, so I pressed the syringe lightly to his bare skin. Not enough to inject, just enough to make him flinch. 6 months, I swear, he blurted. Why? I growled. He drew a shaky breath. John, you were never home, he said. She felt alone. Those words hit harder than I expected. I had braced for excuses, for blame, but not that. My fist clenched. So your solution was to sleep with one of my coworkers? I snapped. Lisa flinched. I was lonely, John, she said, voice breaking. I tried to tell you. I tried to talk. I felt like I didn't matter. I stared at her, anger raging, but now something else surfaced. A flicker of doubt in her eyes, as if even she didn't fully grasp why she'd done it, like she'd wrapped herself in reasons that were excuses. I turned back to Matt. And you? I asked. Was she just convenient? His lips trembled. I don't know, man. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I swear. I exhaled slowly, the syringe heavy in my hand. For a moment I let myself be careless enough to assume no one was watching. Only I wasn't watching. I was filming. A week after the first disappearance, I started to dig. Business filings, side projects, shell LLCs. One lead bled into another. A faint trail of money that only someone who knew where to look would follow. He'd been consulting for a startup skirting the edge of fraud. Not outright criminal. Not yet, but shady enough to make the firm nervous. I didn't extort him. I didn't threaten. I slid the file into the right inbox and left it anonymous. Subject: might want to look into your boy. No return address. No fingerprints. By the next Thursday, his name vanished from their site. I watched it happen live. One refresh and he was gone. She noticed. That night the tension behind her eyes said it all. She checked her phone more and looked through me like she was trying to decode what I already knew. I didn't give her anything because here's the truth about men like Drew. They bet on women who cost them nothing. She had already cost me too much. So I made her expensive. Not to ruin him. I didn't care enough for revenge, but to make sure she felt consequence. The change wasn't from my words but from the silence that followed them. She paced the kitchen that evening, half-heartedly chopping while glancing down the hallway as if waiting for a knock. A call, some breakdown that never came. I didn't react. I repositioned. She tried small talk over pasta. I nodded and added nothing. She mentioned needing help with car insurance. I said, that's not my lane anymore. Plain. Final. She didn't come to bed until I was asleep, or pretending to be. She started to unravel. Not from confrontation but from absence. Silence fills the cracks where excuses used to hide. And every time she looked my way she asked, without words, what do you know? I never answered. Some truths echo louder when unsaid. And some moves only land when the hand that plays them is unseen. She'd always been masterful in public. The woman who could own a room, steer the conversation, laugh loud enough to attract attention without seeming desperate. She curated her circle like a fortress. Dinners, double dates, book clubs she never read for. They saw the edit version of her. Polished, composed, loyal. I never set out to tear that image down. I simply let it fade. It started small. I pulled back from couples nights, declined group dinners, skipped Saturday brunches. When others asked, she said I was tired. When they asked me, I said I needed space. I wasn't rude. I was quiet, deliberate, disciplined. Then came Melanie's birthday, a big wine bar crowd, 20 people we usually ran with. I showed up late and alone. She was already holding court, laughing that little too loud laugh. She spotted me, surprised. I nodded, went to the bar, ordered neat whiskey and didn't join her table. Instead I sat with co-workers she rarely mentioned and let them talk. Turns out she'd been venting to them about long hours, a cold husband, the growing distance. One of them, Troy, liked to overshare after a couple drinks. He leaned over mid-evening and said, honestly man, she's been acting different. We all thought you two were solid, but it's like she's trying too hard. I smiled, sipped, stayed silent. Later, near the coat check, she asked why I sat with them. They were more honest, I said and left. After that, calls from mutual friends trickled in. Cancellations, soft distancing. People weren't pointing fingers so much as stepping back from discomfort. She felt it. Then a whisper at work. HR heard a client mention seeing her out with another man. It wasn't formal, just a note. She came home restless, phone in hand, pacing. She asked if I'd spoken to anyone. I hadn't. That was the strategy. I didn't burn her world. I dimmed it until even she couldn't pretend it was bright. The cruelest isolation isn't being abandoned. It's being quietly excluded by those who once vouched for you. By the second weekend, the silence spread beyond us. Group chats slowed, brunches were canceled. Even her sister let texts sit unanswered. The house grew quiet, not peaceful, hollow. She'd wander into a room and leave, flip on the TV, mute it 5 minutes later, sit at the kitchen table with the laptop open and do nothing. I kept my rhythm: wake, gym, coffee, office, garage, sleep. Same house, different life. I didn't need to vanish physically. I stepped out emotionally, and she began to notice. One Monday she stood in the den doorway while I read, watching like she needed permission to speak. I didn't look up. That silence said more than any argument. She tried gestures. Cooking, leaving my whiskey out, folding my shirts. I thanked her no more. She suggested a weekend away. I said I already had plans. True. I'd booked a solo hiking trip, the sort of signal-free escape I hadn't done since before we met. She looked as if she'd forgotten. I'd once had a life independent of her. That night I watched from the porch as she stared at a framed photo of us 3 years earlier, wiped the dust, then turned it face down. The next morning I found it in the trash. I didn't ask why. I already knew. She hated that I no longer orbited around her. This new version of me was neither furious nor pleading, just distant, capable, self-contained. There's a specific power in being present but unreachable. It doesn't shout or fight. It leaves the door open and waits for the other person to realize they aren't invited in. When they do, they don't sob. They scramble to reclaim the version of you they took for granted, and discover he's moved toward the light and isn't looking back. She cracked one Thursday. It wasn't theatrical at first, just tension folding into itself. I came home with my gym bag and she blocked the hallway, eyes sharp, arms folded. "Can we talk?" she asked. I nodded, walked past, set my bag down. She stood, started speaking, and I let her. "I don't know what's happening anymore," she said. That was the thing. She didn't know what it looked like from the outside. The silence, the change in tone, the widening gap. I waited. She paced. She said, "You've changed. We used to be a team. I don't know who you are anymore." I hadn't changed. I'd returned to the man I was before I got lost. I told her that calmly. And for the first time she flinched because I acknowledged the shift without trying to soothe it. She accused me of coldness. I called it clarity. She asked if I wanted the marriage. My answer: I want a partner, not a performance. Her voice cracked. She sat, trembling, searching my face for softness I didn't have. "So this is it," she whispered. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. She took silence as verdict. The days after felt like the air before a storm, heavy and inevitable. She moved slower, spoke less, watched me like a stranger. I let her feel it. I didn't gloat. I kept my routine, read, slept. She tried to revive the old rhythms, late-night wine, shared meals, sudden compliments, but they bounced off. Not because I hated her, but because I no longer needed her validation. The intimacy she rationed was already buried. I wasn't punishing her. I was protecting myself. The final departure isn't always a door slamming. Sometimes it's staying in the same house while stopping showing up. Her unraveling didn't explode. Real collapse whispers before it roars. She was late to work twice. Her manager called. She let the second call ring. I overheard her talking to her mother, her voice low and brittle. By week 3 her smile was a shadow. A friend from the office stopped by while I worked in the garage. Through the blinds I watched them on the porch as the friend leaned in, and then stepped back with that look people give when they've seen too much. The public persona she'd curated was cracking, and I wasn't the one pulling at the seams anymore. I'd stopped covering for her choices. At a mutual friend's dinner she tried to play the old part. Smiles, touches, a forced laugh. I stayed polite, measured, distant. Afterward one of the wives pulled her aside. I caught a fragment in the hallway. "You used to light up when he walked in. What happened?" Her reply was small and defeated. "I don't know." And worse, everyone else knew now too. The social illusion was gone. She was no longer the enviable wife. She was the woman quietly losing her grip. At home the silence between us became understood. She stopped trying to fill it. She cooked less, stopped caring what I watched, sometimes sat staring with eyes empty. I felt no triumph. This wasn't winning. It was reclaiming myself from the version that begged. I carried my peace like armor. Her collapse was quiet and that made it real. The show had ended. The audience left. What remained was the woman in the mirror, and the echo of the man she assumed would always be there. I packed without drama. No slammed drawers, no loud goodbyes. I moved methodically through the things that were mine, leaving keys to the garage, the second car, the mailbox on the counter. Utilities switched. Subscriptions canceled. Bank accounts divided quietly and legally. The new apartment I signed for was small and efficient. Not a whole new life, just a cleaner one. No photos on the wall, no shared towels, no lingering perfume. I moved in the night before I told her. I didn't explain. I left a single folded note on the bed we used to share. I hadn't vanished. I'd simply stopped showing up where I wasn't wanted. When she found the note, I imagined her waiting for a punchline that never came. Silence was the point. My exit wasn't about inflicting pain. It was about honoring myself. She called once. I let it ring. A week later she texted something vague and nostalgic. I didn't reply. What do you say to someone who only recognizes your value when it's gone? I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I felt clarity instead. After being ignored long enough, the silence becomes a comfort. You stop seeking warmth where cold felt normal. When the door finally closes, you don't miss the echo. People ask if I'd ever take her back. I answer honestly. You don't go back to places that taught you to forget who you are. Now I wake without weight on my chest, move through my days without second-guessing if I'm enough. There's peace in not begging for love. There's freedom in becoming the person who never needed to ask twice. She stayed in the same house and the same routine, but when she looks in the mirror now she sees absence. Not because I disappeared, but because I chose not to stay. In that silence her decisions shout louder than anything I could have said. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.